When you look at the way many homes look, sometimes it feels like people forget what a home is actually meant for. Rooms stacked with boxes nobody opens, closets stuffed until nothing fits, garages filled with things that haven't been touched in years. For many, this has become the normal way of doing things. But at some point, the home starts to look less like a space for living and more like a storage unit. For me, 8 years of minimalism and decluttering have brought a lot of positive changes. My spaces feel lighter, easier to manage, and more supportive of everyday life. That's why I want to talk about this today, because your home deserves more than being used as a dumping ground. So in this video, I want to break down why we slip into this way of living, what that does to us, and how to start shifting into a healthier way of seeing our space. Let's get into it. When you think about why homes end up looking like storage units, it's rarely because people wake up one day and say, I want to fill every corner of my house with things I don't use. It happens slowly for very human reasons, and often those sound logical on the surface, but underneath they keep us stuck. The first one is what I would call laziness disguised as efficiency. You know that moment when you don't want to make a decision, so you tell yourself, I will just put it in the spare room for now. It feels easier and faster in the moment, like you are saving time, but really you are just postponing the decision. Every item piles onto the next, and before long, those little choices add up to rooms you cannot use anymore. Another layer is this belief that stuff equals safety. Life is uncertain, and uncertainty is uncomfortable. When things feel a bit shaky, having more around you can feel like protection. You might have duplicates, extras, boxes of just-in-case items that create the feeling that you are prepared for anything. Bigger homes are sold as better homes, not just because they give you more space to live, but also because they give you more space to keep. A full closet or a packed garage gets seen as a sign of success and stability, but the safety and status it promises are only illusions, in my opinion. Like, what you are really left with is a home that makes you feel more stressed, not really safer. And that stress doesn't just come from your own habits. A big reason clutter grows is through inherited clutter. So things passed down by family, gifts you don't like but feel guilty getting rid of. These things carry weight beyond their function. It feels like you are carrying not only the stuff itself, but also the meaning attached to it. And so you hold on, maybe even for decades, even when it doesn't really support your life. In many ways, it is the same with identity. Objects often act like anchors for who we are, or at least who we once were. A pile of books you don't read anymore can feel like proof that you are still a reader. Old gear from a hobby you gave up can feel like proof that that version of you is still alive somewhere. Letting those things go isn't just about losing the item. It feels like you are erasing part of yourself. There's even a name for this, which is loss aversion. We tend to feel the pain of losing something more strongly than the relief of gaining something, so in this case, space. So even when the rational side of you knows the space would help, the emotional side reacts to the discomfort of letting go, and that discomfort wins, so the item stays. Then there's the false functionality. Items are kept often because they could be useful, not because they actually are. It's the common I might need it one day trap. It sounds very practical, but usually it's just misplaced optimism. You're just overestimating how often you will use something. So you keep things that will never really serve your life just because they hold some potential value. Clutter isn't always obvious. Mess is easy to spot because it comes and goes, but clutter is a bit different. It builds up slowly over time, often without you noticing. It hides in drawers, cupboards, and basements, or even in a perfectly organized spare room where every box is neatly stacked but full of things you don't actually need. Just because you don't trip over it doesn't mean that it isn't creating stress little by little in the background. All of these reasons are deeply human. Yes, sometimes it is just laziness, but most of the time it runs deeper than that. It's about the way our minds work, the emotions tied to objects, and the culture that constantly tells us to hold on and to buy more. And when you put all of these together, it is no wonder so many homes end up looking like that. And if you don't face it, the cost only grows. That's why we need to talk about what this actually does to your life. When you let storage thinking take over, it slowly starts to reshape your whole life. The first cost is space itself. Every box you keep takes away from what that room or space could become. A room filled with stuff could be a place for guests, a small studio, or simply a calm corner where you actually want to spend time. A garage that's stuffed with boxes could have been a home gym, a workshop, or a space to reset. But instead, the potential of those rooms gets buried under things you don't really use. Another hidden cost is financial. The more clutter you have, the more you start to feel like you need a bigger home. You think you have outgrown the space, but really, it's just the clutter that doesn't belong there anymore. That feeling pushes people toward renting storage units, buying larger houses, or spending money on extra furniture and storage systems. But in reality, what most of us need isn't more square meters. We just need less clutter. And even if you can afford the space, you still end up paying with something more valuable than money, your time. You might spend hours moving the clutter from one spot to another, shifting piles around to make space, or digging through boxes when you cannot find what you actually need. And when it comes to time to move houses, all of that clutter suddenly becomes boxes and furniture you drag with you, turning a nice new space, a nice new home into a draining project. So clutter also comes with a heavy mental load. Every object you store is a decision you haven't finished making. You keep telling yourself you will figure it out later, but the longer those decisions sit, the heavier they become. And a lot of those unfinished decisions are tied to the past, old clothes, hobbies you gave up, or things from a version of yourself that probably no longer exists. So instead of helping you live in the present moment, your home becomes a reflection of who you were. And as long as your space is filled with those emotional anchors, it's harder to step into the future with clarity, which is why it's so important to flip the perspective, to stop seeing your home as a storage unit and start asking what it should actually give back to you. At its core, a home isn't meant to hold things, it's meant to hold life. The original role of shelter was simple: protection, rest, and human connection. A place where people gathered, slept, and shared meals. Filling a home with all this stuff was never the point. If you look back historically, most homes were small and people lived with less. In many cultures, storage as we know it like these days, it didn't even exist. Rooms were designed to serve people, not objects. The modern idea of every home needing extra closets, attics, basements, and garages is actually quite new. And now we have built entire industry around it. Like paid self-storage is a multi-billion-dollar business, which tells you more about our cultural clutter problem than about any real need for space. A living space should make you feel calm, not guilty. It should be a supportive environment that gives energy back, not drains it. That doesn't mean that it has to look empty or that you cannot own anything. A simpler home is really about function. It's about a room serving a clear purpose instead of becoming a place for just storing stuff. So storage in itself is not the enemy. It can be useful when it supports life, but when it starts replacing living, you lose balance. So the mindset has to shift from how can I store this to do I even need to keep this? That's the turning point. Because when your home is set up for living, not storing, it creates more abundance in your life. You get more space, more possibility, more clarity. Imagine walking into a spare room that we have discussed in this video that isn't stacked with boxes, but instead has a reading chair by the window or a desk where you can focus on a passion project. Picture a living room that is not crowded with stuff, but set up for relaxing or spending time with people you care about. Think about a balcony, not as a place to stack boxes, but as a spot for fresh air, a few plants, or simply sitting with a coffee. That's the real potential of a home, not to be a storage unit, but to be a living space, a place that holds your life, your connections, and your energy. And if you want that, it starts with action, of course. You cannot think your way into a lighter home. At some point, you have to open the box, face the decision, and let it go. But there is a part not many people talk about. The hard part is doing this while living with other people. A partner maybe who doesn't see the clutter, family who keeps giving you things you didn't ask for, friends who expect you to spend the way you used to, or the feeling that your lifestyle has drifted too far from everyone else's. That's where the real struggle often hides, not in the stuff itself, but in the people around you and the culture that keeps saying more is better. That is the reason I have made a guide called Simple Living with Non-Minimalists, the Ultimate Guide. It's about making a simple life and home feel natural and sustainable, even when other people don't share your values. If you think you could benefit from a guide like that, you will find the link to it in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to stay kind and meaningful in your own beautiful journey. See you in the next one.